When Harrison speaks, he always talks about how God is funny and he has a sense of humor. And so sometimes he won't know what he's going to preach up until the day that he does it. And I always thought that he was exaggerating until now because for a week I had no idea what I was going to say. And I was like, okay, I need to figure out something. And then I was going to talk about Naaman. And then that wasn't it. And then this weekend I finally figured it out. But I always thought that he was just exaggerating. But in the theme of this is my story, if I were to summarize my story, I would use 1 John 2:8. And it says, "Again, a new commandment I write unto you, which thing is true in him and in you, because the darkness is past and true light now shineth." And so for years of my life, I was surrounded in darkness, spiritually, physically, mentally, just I was hopeless and I was lost and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was constantly living in a state of why me and why is this happening to me? And so, um, in the spirit of transparency, I didn't really want to keep living. And so this all came to a head one night after a really, really bad day. And I was determined that, like, this is it. Like, I have nothing else to live for. I mean, like, how do you keep going when the worst possible things just keep happening to you and you have no control over it and there's no light at the end of the tunnel, or at least it seems there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and there's no way out, and you're just so lost and confused, and you feel like you're a slave to the darkness and you can't get out of it. But the answer is Jesus. So I pulled out my Bible and I just started reading, and I started in the New Testament. And I probably started in Matthew because I probably honestly just opened it up to the first page in the New Testament. And I started reading about this God who manifests himself in flesh and then came down and died a brutal death. Like, it's not pretty, it was brutal. And I started crying because I was like, how could someone possibly love me this much? And I just decided that day that if he, like the very cliche quote, if he could live or if he could die for me, then I could live for him, literally. And so, as it says, because the darkness is past and the true light now shineth. And so I was living in the goodness of God, and I was living in his true light, even if I didn't recognize it or even if I didn't want to acknowledge it. And so this whole time, he was keeping me and he was helping me, and I was just not understanding it, and I didn't notice it at the time. But my circumstances don't change his goodness. He's good no matter what I'm going through, and he's good even if I don't want to admit that he is good. And so I didn't get to dictate if he was good. And so he kept me through the darkest times of my life. And a couple of years ago, if you were to if I were given the opportunity to rewrite my story, I would have. I would have written out all of the hurt and all the pain and all the trauma and everything that I was going through. But that's a problem because that would have written out my unique testimony, because everyone has this very unique testimony to you. And what you've experienced isn't what other people have experienced. And you have this unique audience because your testimony is so unique that only you can reach. Because, like, you know people that I don't know, and I know people that you don't know. But we also might know the same people, but they have a different relationship with you than they would me. So they would hear something better from you than they would hear from me. And so I'm glad that we don't hold the pen, because we all get into the point sometimes in our lives where we would have written out things that are a great testimony, and they're powerful, but they're not powerful because of us. They're powerful because our testimony glorifies him, and so that makes them powerful. And so no one knows the detail of your testimony like you do, and no one can understand the pain that you went through, and no one can understand or explain it as eloquently as you could, even if you don't think you're good at speaking or you're good at writing. And so whenever I look back on the times where I had no idea how God was going to use this to his glory, I didn't understand how he was going to transform me or help me or be with me or do anything, I'm glad that I didn't give up, because while it was a route I never would have chosen for myself, it took me one step closer to God and becoming the person he wanted me to be, because through my story, I've learned that there are some monstrous people, but there are also people who can love you with every fiber of their being. And while the world seems like it can come at you with everything in anything, there is a God who's standing, and he's stronger than all of that, and he fights for you. And so if I were to try to tell anyone anything today, my advice would be to not sweep your story under the rug, because for so long I was ashamed to talk about it. I was scared to talk about it. I was worried that it would come off like I was complaining, or that I was making it up, or just something. Like, I was just scared of talking about it completely. And so I would say that don't spend your days wishing it away. And because your story gives hope to people who are just like you and experiencing the same thing you are. Because when you come out of your trial or your situation, it gives hope to the people who are experiencing something very similar to you. And so my one point of this entire thing, which is very short, which I was very surprised of, is to not sweep your testimony under the rug. And hallelujah for the cross. And I'm going to go over there.